Lockheed Martin stock, currently trading at $477.60 with a market cap of $122.14 billion. The question becomes, why are they trading at such a high valuation, and will this continue into the end of the year? And in today's video, I'll be covering the macroeconomic events that will be affecting Lockheed Martin stock as well as their business model, and covering a few bits of technical analysis that will drive Lockheed Martin into 2024. Now let's get right into it. To start off, one of the big macro events that is happening right now is between the US as well as China and the Taiwan conflict. As of recent, we've seen US and Chinese relations essentially getting destroyed by Nancy Pelosi's last visit in the past August, when they basically talked about democratically governing Taiwan, but Beijing was like, no, we want that territory. And since then, the US lawmakers have visited Taiwan, but even Republican Representative Kevin McCarthy, who took over as House Speaker in January, said that they may be able to visit, however, that will be under Chinese control. They hope that the PRC, or People's Republic of China, does not use a visit of the member of Congress to Taiwan as a pretext of military action, basically stating that just because the US went to the island, or to Taiwan, they don't have a reason to necessarily attack it, right? And again, we've seen a lot of stuff in the recent news with the Chinese balloons, as well as the relations between Washington and Beijing being kind of rocky. But again, this may not necessarily affect LMT and their business model now. However, in 2025, in this article by Times, there's basically a prediction that there going to be a war with China. And whether it's over Taiwan or just overall relative relations, we're really seeing that there have been a lot of remarks talking about how the Pacific, more specifically, and this is the US Lieutenant Colonel now, talking about how you have to get ready for combat. They're getting really fired up, and this is from the US side. We have to be thinking that from a Chinese side, they're probably quite fired up too now. And again, to lay into this even more, and just this idea even more about how defense stocks and how overall defense is going to keep on being more and more spent. In the last year alone, the US spent $800 billion on defense. Again, while this is a smaller and smaller amount of GDP that we use every single year, in the last 3 years alone, the US real GDP actually did not grow much. So even though they're technically spending less money on defense comparative to their GDP, the US really hasn't grown all too much in the last 3 to 5 years, right? And so now when we go look at kind of the Ukraine war live updates and Putin kind of warning NATO's nuclear capability, this is big, right? Because at the beginning of the war, it was very much so Russia coming into Ukraine, taking out communications, and trying to shut everything down from the outside world. But what we've seen as of recent is that Putin and Russia have been trying to exploit the nuclear side of everything. And this hasn't really forced the US's hand just yet, but let's say they do. There has been a lot of different articles that are coming out by the F-35s that Russia's willing to shoot them down in a very short period of time, as well as potentially send missiles, targeting missiles, towards these same aircraft. And if Russia does decide to do this, again, this is a lot of speculation, this could be really big news for defense. And whether this is Lockheed Martin or you're looking into Boeing, there's most likely going to be a huge jump in volume across the board. And what we've been seeing as of recent in terms of how LMT or Lockheed Martin makes their money, right? Last year, missiles and as well as fire control systems, or fire control, came up with $11 billion, with rotary mission systems $16 billion. Those two parts alone being in combined of almost 41% of all revenue made by LMT. Yes, their aeronautics are big, controlling almost 42%, but pretty much the rest being some kind of defensive side, right? Even their space is a lot of their space satellites that are used to grab information for the long term. Now, I don't say all this and just have nothing else out there, right? This is a lot of speculation in terms of thinking that, yes, US-China, yes, US-Ukraine, Ukraine-Russia may start blowing up in the next few months. However, another big thing I'd like to look at as well is that LMT, over almost the last, I think it's 8 quarters, they've had more institutional buying than total outflows in all but 1 or potentially 2 quarters, right? And this is dating back all the way essentially to beginning of 2020, 2019. And we've really seen a lot of institutional buying, especially pop up in Q4 of 2022. I covered this in the Tesla article that we did on OBR Investing's Instagram as of just a few weeks ago. But one of the big things that we like to see is like the flow, right? What is going on with these big investment banking companies, and where do they think this stock is going to move, or do they think it's going to move, just period, right? And as of recent, we've seen a lot of these big, not terribly big, but a lot of these big advising or shareholders adding onto gigantic positions for themselves, 20%, 30%. Again, we have definitely seen some decrease, but generally speaking, a lot of these big shareholders are continuing to either hold a lot or adding a huge chunk to their original position. One of the biggest ones I want to point out is Truist Financial Corp. They're usually known for a little more conservative investing, and even them adding 27%. Now, when you go and look at LMT's chart, this is on weekly time frame. Again, this is some just very basic technical analysis, but as of right now, we're currently trading around this $477 to up to $500 range. We haven't really seen a huge breakout as of recent, and most likely speaking, we may get a little bit of a tick down here with kind of decreasing volume. So if you are looking to enter a position on LMT, what I'll suggest is just, again, do more research, but I would really look towards that $440, $450 level for potentially a retest at kind of this ascending wedge that we've been forming on the daily/weekly time frame, right? This is dating all the way back to March of 2018, and it looks like we might be going for this breakout into the high 500s, potentially low 600s by the middle of 2024 if everything plays out as it seems. Again, this is not really taking too much of the fundamental side, but rather the technical as well as the macro side. Again, this is all I just want to bring you guys today. Something potentially kind of interesting in the news and something to kind of keep your eye on. Hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day, and peace.